Daniel Turner, founder of energy advocacy group Power the Future, joins us now. So Daniel, how stressful have things been on the global market since this war started?
Oh, very much so. And it's hard to absorb these prices for the foreseeable future. I think any market, especially one as robust as the American economy, can absorb high oil prices for a couple of weeks because it drops, right? And then you say, wow, that really stunk last week. I had to fill up my car. It was expensive, but things go back to normal. But we're hitting the 60-day mark, and it doesn't seem to have a very near end in sight. I hope it does. And it will start having more and more of an impact the longer it gets dragged out.
So the president's constantly meeting with energy executives. In fact, it just happened again yesterday, trying to find out what they could do in terms of production, knowing it's a global market. What are you hearing, and what are they doing? Could they be doing more to keep the prices down while still keeping the pressure on Iran?
No, there's nothing really more we can do on our side because it's not a production problem. It's not a supply problem. It is the jitters of these straits and the inability to get oil and gas through there and get it to all of its ports. And so, yes, we are exporting and trying to backfill, but there's only so much oil we can produce, and we need it here too. There's a phenomena in oil and gas markets, which is demand destruction. And that's what we're headed for. And what that means is that if oil stays really high for a long time, it alters people's behavior, and people stop, they won't go on a summer road trip. They won't buy a plane ticket. And then the demand for oil eventually begins to slow down. And recovering from demand destruction is a lot harder and a lot more expensive than what we're seeing right now. So that's what the markets are. That's what the industry is really afraid of, is the long-term damage to demand, because we're starting to price ourselves out of consumer ability to afford this product.
Maybe it gets people into electric cars, but that we know what the grid is fueled by. That's usually fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's a great point. And this is one of my favorite quotes of all time from Thomas Sowell, the great American economist, is there aren't really solutions, there are trade-offs, right? And so the Biden administration sent us EVs or put EVs before us as a solution, but they're not. They're a trade-off, right? They're made from oil and gas, and they run on a grid which is burning gas and coal. So it really didn't solve a problem. It just used oil and gas in a different way. There is no way to stop using oil and gas. Even people who are saying, well, you know what, we need to build more wind and solar. They're made from oil and gas, right? So we're using oil and gas differently. We're not using any less of it.
Yeah, it's incredible what's going on. But right now, what is it at today? Do you know?
105 right before I came on the program is West Texas, WTI West Texas Intermediate. And that's unsustainable for a long term, right? Because it will start impacting the way people behave, and that will have demand destruction. Now, I'm still going to say for the long term, this is good, right? We need to, as Secretary Rubio just said in that clip you played before I came on, right? There is long-term Islamic threat that we are eliminating, and that is good for the world. But right now, it's costing us. And, I saw United Airlines, for example, say they were raising prices 20%. That will impact how people travel. Maybe you're going to bring your kid to school in September, but maybe mom's not going to go, or maybe mom and dad aren't going to go. Just the kid's going to go because you can't afford 3 tickets, right? So that demand destruction means we're going to stop producing oil and gas or exploring for more because there's no demand. And so that's where we're headed. That's got people more and more nervous.
What about UAE leaving OPEC? Is that a good thing?
Huge. Yeah, this is great. Right. And I think this is a great philosophical conversation. I wish we could do this with like a cigar and a glass of bourbon, like at a fire pit, because these are the lofty conversations which I love about your show and podcasts in general. But there is a global phenomena of these global entities breaking down, right? The United States is looking at NATO and saying, our interests and NATO interests aren't aligning. What are we doing, right? You look at a country like Hungary and Poland, and they say, we're in the European Union, but our interests are not aligned, right? So what's happening in UAE is they're saying, we're part of OPEC, but our interests are not aligned. We're producing 3 million barrels. We could produce 5, but OPEC tells us we can't. Why are we part of OPEC? right? Who gets to decide our industry, us or a bunch of ayatollahs in Vienna, which always makes me laugh. OPEC's headquartered in Vienna. So this is an alignment of saying we want our nation to be more important than this globalist entity. So there's a lot of global entities breaking down right now. It's fascinating.
So Daniel, tell me, we've kind of taken our eyes off Venezuela, but you haven't. So tell me how they're adapting to Western investment.
Last I heard, there were 5 American companies who were already active there. I know a number of oil and gas CEOs who are going down quietly for multiple reasons, right? There are security concerns. There are, economic concerns. If someone saw the CEO of Brian Kilmeade Oil going to Venezuela, that has implications to you and your stock and your company. So this is happening very quietly, but by God, it is happening. And Venezuela, it's easier to produce more oil and gas on wells already drilled than to drill new ones. So Venezuela has an infrastructure. They can get to 5 million barrels a day pretty quickly with investment and American technology. And that will be a huge play for the Western Hemisphere, for America's interests, and really, really bad for communist China, who's not going to have this supply of constant oil coming from Maduro.
So I'm reading this story about Thailand, and they consider us an ally, and they are running out of oil and gas. And they said the U.S. hasn't done anything for them. I mean, is there things we can do without blowing up the global market? I mean, are there special things that you could supply? I mean, when there's natural disasters hit and things of that nature, this is a war disaster. What can we do for our countries that are, especially in the Pacific?
If we were in better shape and we had 800 million barrels on our strategic petroleum reserve, we could do something like that, right? I'm not positive of the numbers. I got to think, but I'll just give it a rough example, right? We use 20 million barrels of oil a day. That's a lot. The United Kingdom uses 1.8. That's nothing compared to what we use. How many barrels of oil does Thailand use a day? I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'm going to ballpark. If the UK is 1 point something, I'm going to ballpark it at 200,000, right? Imagine if we had 800 million barrels in the reserves that we could take care of our allies. But we don't have the reserves because Biden drained them for the 2022 midterms. We don't talk a lot about that. It's a lot of math, right? And our Congress members don't like math and they don't like facts. You saw that Rosa DeLauro clip from yesterday, right? They like to scream about climate change, but this is a real problem we inherited from the Biden years. We don't have a huge supply in reserves because Biden drained it. So there's not much we can do right now, and that's not our fault. That's Biden's fault.
Well, I guess we're going to see what's going to happen in terms of how strong that blockade is. This might not be in your ballpark, but I'll just try you. Do we know anything that's going in and out? We know that Scott Bessent is trying to stop the shadow fleet of tankers, which shuts off its transponders, tries to stay off the grid as they deliver oil and gas to Cuba and places like China. And Iran's doing a lot of that. Venezuela used to. I hope that's in the past tense. I wouldn't know. But have we had success making that a solid blockade?
They're really quiet about this, and I think for strategic reasons. I think they're making it very clear they know what's getting through and what's not, and they're selecting it. But just looking at the geography of that region and having been to that region a bunch, right, at its point where ships can pass, right, the straits at its narrowest point is maybe 30 miles, but many of those miles are marshes, right? So where the ships can actually pass, we're talking about 15 miles. If the U.S. Navy can't shut down and monitor 15 miles, we got a really big problem, right? So they know exactly what is going on there. What they're disclosing to the world is very different. And I'm sure they are letting through certain ships, no transponders, keeping it quiet, and stopping others. So I think they're being cagey deliberately, but there's no way in hell ships are getting through that we don't know about.
Daniel Turner, founder of an energy advocacy group called Power the Future. Thanks, Daniel. Look forward to seeing where we go from here, because energy could bring them to the table legitimately. Daniel, thanks.
Really could. Yeah, of course, Brian. Thank you.